You worked for 30 years, you earned decent money, and somehow it still feels tight. I want you to hear this clearly. That feeling is not proof you failed. It has a name, it has a pattern, and tonight I am going to walk you through it slowly. Because the answer is not that the money never came. It is that every time the money grew, your life quietly grew right along with it. Let me start at a kitchen table in 1994. A couple I knew, Tom and Linda, sat at that table on a Sunday night with a checkbook and a stack of envelopes. One income, 2 small kids, a mortgage that felt enormous. They did the math twice, and it came out tight both times. Linda said the thing everyone says at that table. Once we get past this stretch, it will get easier. 30 years later, same couple, nicer table. The kids are grown. By the time Tom and Linda stopped working, their income was roughly triple what it was that night in 1994. And on a Sunday evening not long ago, Linda sat down with the bills, did the math twice, and felt the exact same knot in her stomach she felt when she was 34. Nothing about that story is unusual. That is the part worth sitting with. If tripling your income does not remove the knot, then the knot was never really about the size of the income. What Tom and Linda lived through has a name. Financial educators call it lifestyle creep or lifestyle inflation. The plain definition is simple. As income rises, spending rises along with it, gradually, without anyone deciding it on purpose, and the breathing room each raise promised never actually arrives. When you are 30, creep is a raise problem. One promotion, one nicer apartment, easy to spot if you look. At 60, it is a different animal. It is 30 years of small, reasonable, invisible upgrades stacked one on top of another, compounding the whole time, hiding inside a life that looks completely normal from the outside. Because it is completely normal. So that is what tonight is. I want to walk you through how this happens to careful, sensible people, where the money actually went, decade by decade, why you never felt it leaving. And I will tell you right now, the last reason it still feels tight has nothing to do with money at all. We will get there before the end. Picture your income over your working life as a staircase. Most of us did not get one big jump. We got steps. A raise here, a promotion there, a better job in your 40s, maybe your spouse going back to work once the kids were in school. Each step up came with a little surge of relief. Finally, now we get some room. Here is what actually happened on almost every step. The relief was real, and it was short. Within a year or so, the new income stopped feeling like extra and started feeling like normal. The mortgage got a little bigger at the next house. The cars got a little newer. The regular expenses grew a ring, the way a tree does. And the room you were promised did not open up, because the standard of living climbed the staircase right behind the paycheck, one step down, all the way to the top. Psychologists have a name for the engine underneath this. They call it hedonic adaptation. In 1978, researchers studied people who had won major lotteries and found something that still surprises people today. Within a fairly short time, the winners were not noticeably happier than anyone else. They rated the ordinary pleasures of daily life, breakfast, a chat with a friend, lower than people who had never won anything. The thrill became the baseline. The baseline became invisible. Your raises worked the same way, just in slow motion. Every upgrade felt wonderful for a season. Then it became the floor you stood on. And you do not feel a floor. You only feel it when it moves. You can test this against your own memory. Think back to the first paycheck of your working life, the whole thing, the actual dollar figure. There was probably a moment when that number felt like riches to you. Somewhere along the way you earned double that, and it felt ordinary. Later you may have earned triple or more, and it still felt ordinary because by the time each number arrived, your life had already grown to meet it at the door. The amazement never lasted. The obligations always did. There was a second piece, and an economist spotted it all the way back in 1949. James Dusenberry noticed that household spending has a ratchet built into it. It clicks upward easily, and it resists coming back down. Once a family reaches a certain standard of living, walking it backward is genuinely hard, even when income drops. Not because people are foolish, because the life they built has taken a shape, and the shape holds. Put those two together, and you get the hidden math of a working life. Income went up in steps, comfort went up right behind it, and then locked in place at every level. So the gap between what came in and what life required stayed almost constant for 30 years. That gap is the thing you actually feel as tight or easy, not the salary, the gap. Which raises the obvious question, what exactly did we spend it on? Because most of you are sitting there thinking, we never lived large. And you are right. That is the trick. This is what creep looked like for your generation. See how many of these followed you home. The bigger house in the good years. Not a mansion. Just one more bedroom, a 2-car garage, a better school district. It felt responsible, and in many ways it was. It also raised the property taxes, the utilities, the insurance, the furniture budget, and the cost of every repair, and it raised them permanently. The newer car every few years. Then the second car, because 2 jobs needed 2 cars. Nobody calls a Buick in the driveway an indulgence. But the payment never really went away, did it? It just rolled from one vehicle to the next for a few decades. Then the comforts that turned into fixtures. Eating out on Fridays became eating out twice a week. The basic cable package became the premium one. The vacation that was once a splurge became the thing you did every summer because you had earned it. And you had earned it. Nobody is disputing that. I just want you to notice that each comfort arrived as a treat and stayed as a standard. There is a simple test for this. Try to remember the last time your household deliberately moved one of these backward, not paused for a hard month, moved backward on purpose for good. Most families can name 20 upgrades and not one downgrade across an entire working life. The escalator only ran in one direction. And then there is the quietest one of all, the one that barely existed when you started working. The subscriptions. The streaming services, the apps, the memberships, the monthly boxes, the renewals that ride along on a credit card. In 2022, a market research firm asked 1,000 American adults to guess their monthly subscription spending. The average guess was $86. Then the researchers walked them through it category by category, and the real average came out at $209 a month. People were off by more than double. About 4 in 10 discovered they were still paying for something they had forgotten entirely. None of this is waste in the way we usually mean that word. There was no yacht. There was no gambling. That is precisely why nobody catches it. Creep never looks like waste. It looks like a normal life, upgraded one small, defensible step at a time. Each individual yes was harmless. 30 years of them is where the raises went. But the pull was never only inside your own house. Some of it came from next door. And researchers found a way to measure it that I find a little haunting. Economists got a rare chance to watch what neighbors do to our spending, because lotteries create a natural experiment. A team studied neighborhoods where someone had won, and then watched what happened to the people living close by. The finding was blunt. Neighbors of lottery winners went bankrupt more often than similar families elsewhere, and the bigger the win next door, the higher the risk. The extra spending showed up almost entirely in visible things. Cars, renovations, the goods other people can see, not in savings. Not in anything invisible. Nobody in those neighborhoods woke up and said, I will now ruin myself to match the house next door. The current is softer than that, and it never announces itself. At 30, the current was coworkers with better cars. At 60, it wears different clothes. It is the neighbor's kitchen remodel that makes your perfectly good kitchen look suddenly dated. The friends who mention the cruise, and the other friends who book the same cruise the next month. The couple at church who seem so relaxed about money that you quietly wonder what they know that you do not. The unspoken rule about what grandparents are supposed to spend on grandchildren these days, at birthdays, at Christmas, at graduation. I knew a man who repaved a driveway that did not need it. The same season 2 other driveways on the street got done. He laughed about it later. He said, "I honestly could not tell you whose idea it was. That is the current. It moves whole streets at once, and it feels like your own idea while it carries you." And notice what the current costs at this stage of life compared to what it cost at 30. Back then, keeping up meant a nicer jacket or a newer stereo. Now the units are kitchens, cruises, landscaping, and what you slip into a graduation card. The stakes rose with the decades, and so did the price of belonging. Keeping pace with a circle that has more than you do is a treadmill with no finish line, and the entry fee compounds. You pay it at every birthday, every remodel season, every summer for decades. Very few people ever total up what the current cost them, because no single payment was ever big enough to alarm anyone. But I have to be honest with you about the ledger. For most families, the heaviest upgrade of the last 30 years was not the kitchen, and it was not the cars. The heaviest one was not for you at all. Somewhere in those 30 years, your children grew up. And if you are like most parents I have known, some part of the money that never seemed to accumulate went to them, not wasted, given. The wedding you wanted to be beautiful. The help with a first apartment, or a down payment, because the housing market they walked into was nothing like the one you walked into. The phone plan that somehow still has 3 grown adults on it. The car repair you covered so a grandchild would be safe on the road. The quiet check written at the kitchen table during a rough patch, the one neither of you ever mentioned again. Maybe it was never big sums. Maybe it was a steady drip of small rescues, spread across 15 years, that no one in the family could total up today if they tried. I want to be careful here because this is tender ground, and the internet is full of people eager to tell you that you did something wrong. I am not going to do that. Helping your children is not a leak in your budget. It is love, expressed in the one language that a hard month understands. For a lot of us, it is more than love. It is identity. Being the parent who can help is part of who you have been for 40 years. It started with school shoes and it never really stopped, and if you had it to do over, you would probably do most of it again. Here is the only thing I want you to see, and then we will move on. This giving is real money. It happened over many years. And almost nobody counts it when they sit there at 62 wondering where it all went. The wondering itself does the damage. You look at the balance, you cannot explain the gap, and the silence fills up with the worst available story. I must have done something wrong. When the truth is often much kinder. A meaningful share of what you earned became a wedding, a roof, a safer car, a softer landing for someone you love. That is not a hole in the record. It is part of the record. Seeing it clearly takes a surprising amount of weight off. Which brings us to the objection I know has been forming in the back of your mind this whole time. You might be thinking, Sam, this is all well and good, but we were not reckless people. We clipped coupons in the lean years. We bought sensible cars. We did fine. Exactly. You did fine. And I need you to understand that this is precisely why the pattern caught you. Because lifestyle creep does not need recklessness. It has never needed recklessness. All it needs is a life that expands a half step ahead of the income year after year. In any single year, the difference is invisible. It is a restaurant tab, a slightly nicer trim package, one more monthly charge. Across 30 years, it is the difference between the retirement you pictured and the tightness you feel tonight. There is an old piece of folk wisdom that shows up under half the money videos on the internet, and it usually gets said with a wagging finger. Live beyond your means and you will end up broke no matter what you earn. The finger wagging is useless, but the mechanism underneath is real, and it is gentler and more universal than the scolds realize. You do not have to live wildly beyond your means. Even a little beyond, sustained long enough, keeps the feeling of broke riding alongside you up every income level you ever reach. And if you think that only happens to undisciplined people, listen to this. National surveys over the past few years keep finding that roughly 4 to 5 in 10 Americans earning 6 figures, describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck. Nearly half, in some waves of the survey. These are people at the top of the staircase, still feeling the same knot Tom and Linda felt in 1994. Think about what that means for a moment. If tightness were really a discipline problem, it would thin out as the incomes got bigger. It does not. The knot shows up at every rung of the ladder, in houses of every size, which tells you the knot is built into the pattern, not into the people. So why does nobody simply trim back? Psychology has an answer for that too, and it won 2 researchers a Nobel Prize. Kahneman and Tversky show that human beings feel losses more sharply than equivalent gains. Losing something you have stings more than getting it ever felt good. Now apply that to a lifestyle. Every comfort you added arrived as a mild pleasure, but removing that same comfort registers as a genuine loss. The premium channels you barely watch, the second car that mostly sits there. Letting go of them feels like moving backward in life, even when the arithmetic says otherwise. So the ratchet holds, not because you lack discipline, but because your mind prices the same item twice. Cheap going in, expensive coming out. You were never careless. You were human, inside a pattern that is beautifully designed to stay unseen. And once you can see it, something interesting becomes possible. Let me offer you a different way to hold all of this. That tight feeling you have been carrying is not a measurement of your bank account. It never was. It is a measurement of the gap between what comes in and what your life quietly requires. For 30 years, you tried to fix the feeling by working on the first number. Earn more, climb another step. And the feeling never stayed fixed because the second number moved every time the first one did. The requirement followed the income the whole way up, like a shadow. More was never going to end that chase because more is not a destination. It moves. It has always moved. Ask the lottery winners from 1978. The shift, and it is a shift of mind, not a set of instructions, is to stop asking how much is possible and start asking a question most of us have never once answered on purpose. What is enough for us in this season of life? Not enough by the neighborhood standards. Not enough by the standards of the couple at church who, for all you know, are lying awake at night too. Enough as in the amount of comfort at which this house is actually content, named out loud, on purpose, maybe for the first time in your life. People who have done this describe something almost physical. The finish line stops receding because for once, you were the one who drew it. What surprises them most comes next. When they finally sit down and picture a genuinely good day at this age, it turns out to be strangely inexpensive. Coffee on the porch while the street wakes up. A long walk. An afternoon with a grandchild who still thinks you hung the moon. A meal cooked slowly with the radio on. The things that make this season rich were never the things the raises were buying. The chase was expensive. The destination, it turns out, mostly is not. And if part of you is whispering that it is too late for this, that a lens you find at 60 is a lens you should have found at 30, I want to push back gently. Seeing the pattern now is not a small thing. Some people work for 50 years and never see it. The couples who finally understand where the money went do not usually collapse into regret. Most of them describe relief. The mystery closes. The self-blame quiets down. Your hands go back on the wheel, and the road ahead, however long it turns out to be, gets driven on purpose. That is available at any age. It is available tonight. At the beginning, I promised you one more reason. The money still feels tight, and I said it has nothing to do with money. Here it is. All those years, the raises were never really chasing dollars. They were chasing a feeling. Arrival. Safety. The deep breath at the kitchen table. We believed the feeling was waiting inside some future number, and every time we reached the number, the feeling had moved out. 30 years of that will convince a person the problem is them. It was never you. It was the address. Security was never going to live inside a bigger salary because security does not live in the first number at all. It lives in the gap. And the gap, unlike the market, unlike prices, unlike everything else this world throws at you, is a decision. A decision that is still entirely yours to make. I think of Tom and Linda one more time here. The night Linda finally understood this, nothing in their accounts had changed, same balance as the week before. But she said the house felt different because for 30 years she had been reading that knot in her stomach as a grade on her life, and it never was one. It was just a gap that had never been given a chance to open. She stopped arguing with the past that evening. By her own account, she slept better than she had in years, so no, you did not fail. You worked for 30 years, you kept a family warm and fed, you helped the people you love, and you carried a pattern you could not see, the same one carried by nearly everyone walking beside you. Tonight you saw it, you are not behind. You are simply the first version of yourself who can finally look at the whole staircase and understand what happened on every step. That puts you ahead of where you were yesterday, and honestly, ahead of most people you know. If this episode put words to something you have felt for years, I would truly like to hear about it. Tell me in the comments which quiet upgrade snuck up on your house over the years. I read every comment. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of the quiet things, and the quiet things will take care of you.